We have more divisions today than ever before. May I ask you to begin our program, President John Silber?
Yes, to say things have not changed is to distort the facts beyond recognition. Things have changed immeasurably. There are many improvements that we should not overlook despite the fact that much remains to be done. We should remember that in 1965, you didn't even have blacks able to attend restaurants in most cities. They couldn't even use the bathroom or the toilet in a U.S. highway. These conditions, at least, have been overcome. One thing we do have to recognize, however, is that the corrective measures that should have been taken in the middle 60s to help and support black families were not done. The provision of preschool education, Head Start opportunities for black children and for poor children generally was not done in any substantial way.
Sister Soldier, a raptivist, a musical artist, and also a political activist, found herself on the cover of Newsweek magazine. Sister Soldier, what are your thoughts as you listen in on these opening comments?
I think that there have been gains for individual people, but we as African people, as a collective, have not moved forward as we should. And most of the time, the African people that you have that are able to occupy the positions of mayors and governors do not occupy it forcefully and forthrightly for the collective of African people in this country. And as a result, what you have is millions of young African and Latino children and youth who are in a state of total chaos, who don't have skills and don't have any idea how they're going to develop their skills, and are estranged from even the adults in their own race because of the problem of not dealing with white racism and the real impact that it has on our lives.
Alan Keyes spoke at the Republican convention this year. You are a candidate, sir, for the United States Senate from Maryland, where you oppose incumbent Democratic Senator Barbara Mikulski, who, yes, was invited to appear on our panel and declined. Increasing numbers of black Americans, including you, Dr. Keyes, have stood to say that too many minority people in this country have internalized the process of the dole, of the handout. Woe is me, I'm black and therefore I can do nothing. I received a terrible education in a racist society. Where is my handout? Is that a fair characterization of your feeling about what has happened to the spirit and the soul of some minority people in this country?
Well, I would say what has happened, because it's not like lightning striking from above. I would have to say what has been done. You know, this was done. You had programs where you wrote the rules and regulations in such a way as to discourage work, to break up families, to actually penalize people who were trying to help themselves. So don't tell me that this suddenly happened to folks. It was done to folks, and now we're going to have to make some active efforts to undo it. And I'm not one of those folks who's going to say there was a big conspiracy to destroy people, but it does seem to me that you couldn't have thought of a better conspiracy to destroy black leadership, the black community, black institutions, than what posed as this effort in the bureaucratic welfare state to help people. And so I think we need to think it through, try to undo its damage, which is going to take conscious use of the same power that helped to produce that damage, and then concentrate on allowing people to have the power to shape their own destiny.
Daruba bin Wahad, you served 19 years for attempted murder of 2 policemen, a judgment that was overturned more recently on the basis of an unfair trial and the withholding of information. Let me ask you, Daruba bin Wahad, how you feel what jumped out at you on that piece?
When we look at these young men on the screen here, one of the young brothers said, you know, what do you know how to do? He said, rob, steal, and kill. What did Columbus know how to do when he came here? Rob the native people of their land, kill them, and exploit them. What did they know how to do? What is in the best tradition of capitalism in this society? Burning, loot, rape, and pillage. This is something that is as integral to the United States as breathing. And the problem with race in this country is that white people in this country do not want to confront their own history and live up to the consequences of that history. And when you don't confront the truth will ultimately destroy you.
Does Mr. Wahad make you squirm at all, Richard Nathan, director of the Nelson Rockefeller Institute of Government of the State University of Albany of New York? You were an original member of the Kerner Commission. How do you respond to the angry observations of Mr. Bin Wahad?
Actually, I was the research director of the commission, and looking back, it's now 25 years. I think there's good news and there's bad news. We've talked a little bit about the good news. The bad news, and I agree with Mr. Wahad, is that in the inner cities, what he's talking about is deepening violence. The inner city conditions, I think, are worsening. But the flip side of that is that there are new neighborhoods, middle class, black neighborhoods in lots of cities that are fighting hard to stave off the effects of inner city problems and violence. And there's a large increase in lots of big cities and suburban African-American neighborhoods that are actually, in many cases, quite well off. Part of the bad news agenda that worries me is that the mood is worsening. There's a backlash, there's a deeper feeling about racism in the black community, and there's a hardening attitude, I think, in the white community. So it's a worrisome time, I grant you that.
But you know, I think that he just did exactly what Deruba brought up, which is that when we deal with the issue of white racism, white people don't deal with the fact that they are the ones who are sicker than anybody else in this particular issue, which is why when you deal with the question of race, you cannot deal with what's wrong with these African people. See, the thing that happened in South Central started with a malady in the justice system where white people could not see white men who had did something against black men and penalize them for what everybody in this country knows that they did. So the problem of white racism is that we don't look in depth and do these little documentaries on white people and what's wrong with them.
I'd like to add to that. The professor, the president, John Silver, said that one of the problems with the programs of the 60s was that they did not provide corrective measures to help the black family. We need to understand that when black people were brought here to the United States, they were brought here as an act of war. They were kidnapped here, and the destruction of the black family and the creation of a slave mentality was an integral part of the development of this nation state. So there has never been an interest in the black family, and that's reflected today. But even more, every city in which we have aspired to so-called political power. In Newark, black males are being murdered by the Newark Police Department under the guise that they're robbing cars. When we look at New York City, the police riot in the street. When we look at LA, there was a riot in the streets. All of these cities have black mayors. Yeah. So we have to begin to understand that moving black people up the economic ladder does not necessarily mean that black people on the bottom of the economic ladder are going to be empowered, because there are black people who identify with the system so much that they are self-hating Negroes.
Mr. Bin Wahad, you seem to be going kaboom to the entire white community. Do we have from you a spirit of belief that there really are out there in America white folks who do not suffer from the pathology that Sister Soldier reminds us does exist in this country?
But why is that the question? In other words, it's the same as when you're dealing with the issue in South Africa. People say, well, if black people get in control of that government, what will they do with the white people who are living there? Why is that the question? Can we refocus the question
as to
how we're going to correct?
Let me have a moment. Let me have a moment to defend my question. Okay. If you believe that all people who are white are interested in pillaging, reminding us, as you painfully do, of our own history.
No, that's a mischaracterization. That's a mischaracterization. And first of all, it's the mischaracterization because the Constitution was established by white males with property. It said all men are created equal. Right. And they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. It didn't say women were created equal with men. And the Bill of Rights was attached to the Constitution because people without property had no rights. So I did not say that all white people are interested in burning and looting and pillaging. I am saying that the ideals that established this country were based on burning, looting, and pillaging people's land.
Accept your point, and you concede to us that in contemporary society, we do have honorable people of all colors who have as much of an interest in the salvation of their babies as...
But the problem with that, Phill, is that the people of good intentions in the white community are the minority. They do not stand on principle, and they do not struggle against their own racism and white skin privilege. See, the problem is this. It's like men who say, I understand how you feel as a woman being subjected to sexist behavior.
They can't possibly.
Not without interacting with women and empowering them.
Bill, the problem, though, I think with this whole analysis, as I see it, we're talking, and I have great respect for the Constitution, but let's be frank, it was not based upon an idealistic view of human beings. Donahue doesn't realize that I think that what he's saying is a description of not white people, but all people, was in fact the foundation of America's political philosophy. People are greedy. Give them a chance, they'll beat you up. Give them a chance, they'll kill you, rape you, rob you. That was exactly, if I may say so, the view of human beings, not just white human beings, but most human beings.
Have we moved somewhat off this animalistic, primitive?
The point is, however, that the point that I think I hear, at least, that what Sister Soldier says and others say, has less to do, we talk about all this economic redistribution and so forth. Let's talk about the basic issue of politics. The basic issue of politics is power. If you have power over me, you're going to abuse it. If I have no power to resist you, then I'm going to be abused. And I don't care what's in your heart. I don't want to know what's in your heart half the time. I want to know whether there's a weapon in your hand and whether I have the means to defend myself against it. Could be economic, could be social, could be political, could be physical, but I've got to be able to defend myself because I can't trust you. And that's an American statement. That is not a statement of some idealism.
There is no virtue in the human soul to be found anywhere?
That's not the point. The point is that if you give people power over you and you can't defend yourself against them, our founders said they will abuse you, and the world, if I don't mind my saying so, from a black person's point of view, I don't have to prove to you that somebody's out to get me. There are 400 years of history in this country that people are out to get me, and they got me more than half the time. I don't have to prove that to anybody.
Jonathan Kozol, whose seminal book, Death at an Early